Tom Sanzone is a graduate of Villanova University. He received the St. Thomas of Villanova Alumni Medal, the Distinguished Service Award, and the College of Engineering Professional Achievement Award. He served on Villanova's Alumni Association Board of Directors from 2011 to 2017. He fully retired in 2019, following a 51-year career at the NASA Johnson Space Center, JSC, in Houston. He most recently served as Senior Executive for Engineering for MRI Technologies from 2011 to 2019. He initially supported the company's efforts during the Apollo program, when he trained most of the Apollo astronauts, including Neil Armstrong, in the use of the company's portable life support system, backpack, that was successfully used on the moon. He became general manager in 1986. His hobbies have included marathon running, Formula Ford racing, traveling internationally with his wife, Brenda, and his 3 grandchildren. He first served as a United Space School host parent in 2018 and has continued in that role since.
What's your story? Have you got a significant moment in this whole many years that you look back to and you cherish the most?
My mother was always after me. My mother was born before the Wright brothers flew their flight. And she lived to just under 100 years old.
Good for her.
3 months short, and she saw men walking the moon. She was always after me. You know, what do they say? The older you get, the smarter your parents become, right?
That's right.
And so she was always after me. The term I use is smell the roses. You know, realize where you are, take it all in. And I will tell you, virtually to a person, none of us did that. We were always like in the moment. What do we have to do next? What's the next? Even when Apollo 11 landed, we had Apollo 12 right on its heel. We couldn't sit back and, you know, we partied for one night for sure, but we couldn't sit back. So it's only upon reflection, and I've not been asked that question a single moment, but on reflection, you know, it's a lot easier to do. It's like the guy I told you in the diner, saying he didn't realize the significance to the country. Because, you know, I mean, it all comes back to Apollo 11 for people that worked on Apollo. But we were so in the moment that we never smelled the roses, you know? So in a way, I regret that now, but my mother was right. And we certainly reflect now, particularly the older we get, you know, everybody has stories. So I've never really thought about it, but I guess it would have to come down to, you know, meeting Kennedy's goal, because there were 400,000 people that worked on the Apollo program. 400,000. And here we were. A friend of mine says, "You had a front row seat in this thing, you know," but we didn't recognize it. I know it's great. Now we have some great reunions at NASA where people do a lot of reflecting, kind of like this, you know, and there's great stories that come out of it. So the night of Apollo 11, I can't say it was like, yeah. I mean, we went to Ellington had an officers club, and we were talking about the Nassau Bay Resort Motor Inn. The grand piano went in the pool the night we landed on the moon, you know, or when the mission was over, because nobody partied till the mission was over. So that was like 4 days later. So there was some pretty, that's where the term splashdown parties came from. And there were some pretty
Is that where
serious
that
parties.
song came from?
Pardon me?
Is that where the song came from? It's a song. Moon.
Oh. I didn't mean Moon River, but yeah. Yeah.
That's another one there.
Yeah. There was some alcohol involved, actually. Anybody else have anything? I don't know. I'm hoping I answered your question.
You did. I think you've had an incredible life.
I've had. I felt a little bit I'll say guilty, because I viewed it as if I were joining a sports team, a championship caliber sports team. But all the people that had gone before me were the ones that had been at all these practices. They had put in all the blood, sweat, and tears. I got to the Johnson Space Center, Manned Spacecraft Center it was called back then, 3 months before the first manned Apollo flight, Apollo 7. And I felt like, and we didn't have much involvement in Apollo 7 or 8 with our equipment. But when we got to Apollo 9, and somebody had mentioned Rusty Schweikert earlier, he's the first one to do a spacewalk with our equipment in low Earth orbit. They wanted to test it. First flight of the lunar module. And then Apollo 10 was like the dress rehearsal for Apollo 11. I mean, they came very close to the moon. They're looking out, you know, like, maybe we'll just land.
Do it now.
Yeah. And then Apollo 11 was the culmination. And Apollo 12 was right on its heels in case Apollo 11 didn't make it, you know, before the end of '69. You know, they would have been the first guy to walk on the moon. So there's a certain amount of luck involved. But anyway, I felt like, particularly for like Apollo 11, I mean, if I stopped and thought about it, it's like, you're in the back room of mission control, and they're about to land on the moon and use your equipment. I would have been, no pun intended, over the moon. I mean, it was just, do your job.
Yep.
You know, do your job. And to be honest with you, I can't remember, I need to ask one of the other guys who was in the room. I can't remember a television in our back room. Now, we stared at data screens, as you guys did a lot of. We stared at data screens. The data would come down from the moon in a digital format and would be displayed on TV screens. And Rob knows me from telling this story the other day, and I actually showed him one of the sheets. Any engineer knows that a piece of data is just a piece of data. You've got to look at trends, right? Where you are right now, that's interesting, but where are you going to be? Where have you come from? What's happening? Are things getting better, worse, staying the same? We took that digital data off the screens and plotted it by hand on 8.5 by 17 graph paper. We had stopwatches that we used on a board for how much oxygen time do we have left, you know, heat exchanger time. I mean, it was crazy. So there were 4 of us, two for Aldrin and 2 for Armstrong. I was on Armstrong's. And so this other guy and I shared the responsibility. We had like a dozen channels of telemetry coming down, you know, temperatures, pressures, things like that. And I don't remember watching the TV screen. But I think back, there had to be one there because we had Suka. In Apollo, my company made the life support backpack, but we didn't make the spacesuit. So there were spacesuit guys watching, you know, if they fell or, you know, we worked together, obviously. And then when shuttle came around, the system that NASA built was integrated, and we became the prime contractor for the whole thing, including the life support system. But honestly, I don't remember it looking at anything but data, you know, and plotting this data. I do remember one of the other guys that was plotting data, when we left the building, somebody said to him, how did it go? Or how did your system perform? Or something like that. Some other kid like me. And he said, well, they're alive, aren't they? I mean, that was his reaction, you know, it's a life support system and they're alive, so. I mean, it was a little tongue